Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's good to be here with you today. I'm Matthew Skelton. I'm the co-author of Team Topologies.
Hi, everyone. My name is Val, and I'm the troublemaker, or otherwise known as the person leading the consulting team at Team Topologies, and a practitioner.
Val's going to try his hardest to make me laugh or distract me during this webinar, as you can see. It's all good. So what are we doing? What are we doing today?
So today we're going to do something a little bit different. Well, different for us because we typically don't do webinars. It's one of our first. And it's not going to be a very traditional webinar in the sense that we're not planning to use a huge amount of slides, but we are planning to hit a lot of points. So it's going to go very fast. It will be a very fast-paced conversation between Matthew and myself, trying to touch as many lessons learned and points that we have uncovered as challenges organizations and leaders face when transitioning to product operating models. Lately, we see more and more of these organizations and leaders making this shift. And all of them are kind of hitting the same roadblocks, the same big challenges, risks. And it seems like there is not enough out there. Not enough is being said about those and how to actually deal with them. And we are going to do this through a perspective of the Team Topologies ideas and concept, the Team Topologies approach, naturally. So apologies if you have not yet managed to read the book or catch up on the latest ideas from Team Topologies. It's not too late. The website is a really good start. We have a good set of resources to help you get started. And the book remains the golden start. It's not enough, but it's a really great start.
For those of you who are on the call, just drop us a message in the chat if it's available to you. If it's not available, we'll make sure it is very soon. Just say where you're from and like which country, maybe your first name or something like that. That'd be nice. The Q&A is open. So if you've got questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A, and we'll try and select them at the right time in the webinar. We'll leave space at the end, or we're aiming to leave space at the end to answer some questions too. Slight chat's disabled, so we'll try and get that one enabled for you. Thanks, Colleen. Appreciate that. So we'll get that enabled for you as soon as we can.
All right. So as I said, we're going to talk about different risks, dangers, failures, challenges that we see as patterns in transitions to product operating models. We're going to touch on a lot of what we call dangers. You can call them risks. For example, we see a lot of organizations and leaders that are falling in the trap of trying to make a product out of everything, or not using this as an opportunity to challenge what they're doing, the things that they're building, the things they're developing, to figure out, is this really a product? Should it exist? The same happens when they start looking at platforms. We see what I call retrofitting of platforms, taking everything from the past that we associate with the word and then assuming that that is a platform. Same happens with products as well. And when it comes to failure modes, there's a long list of those we're going to go through, but just to give you an idea of a few, we see quite often organizations that are defining products only as the things they sell and forgetting that products are things that are consumed. So we'll be talking a little bit like today, what is a product? How do you recognize a product? Which will help to demystify some of the gaps and explain why they are failures, especially when it comes to platforms and components or components of products. Quite often these are overlooked and they're being just seen as technical things, not necessarily as products. Another big failure is whenever custom off-the-shelf systems come into the picture. So a lot of people either say, oh, these are not products, Others are saying, well, yeah, this is a product, SAP is a product, Salesforce is a product, and we're just going to have a product team behind. Again, that's not a good idea. We'll be looking at how this can be done differently. A lot of people forget about technical depth and how we deal with this. And that brings me to actually one other thing that I need to highlight. For the purpose of the session today, we are only going to look at the digital world, the technology, software-driven products. We are in the future going to also look at the cyber technical, so things like embedded systems where you also have hardware involved. It's slightly different, or something that this deserves time on its own. So for the purpose of today, we are not going to touch this part, and we're definitely not going into the world of physical products like chocolate bars and anything in between. And so with this, I would hand over to Matthew to set the scene a little bit, because I think if we're speaking about products, if we're speaking about product operating models, we need to make sure that we use the terms in the same way. So I'll let Matthew very briefly explain what we understand by product operating models, products, and on the first place, why do we actually need at all to be looking at new operating models?
Exactly. Thanks, Val. There's a few questions just in the chat here. Please share the best way to fail with product operating model. We'll do that. We'll do that shortly.
Oh, yeah. Plenty.
There's a good one. Plenty of failures in there that we see. Why do we even need this shift from project to product? So I'll talk about that very, 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 very shortly. Please share some advice on shifting to product-based when we have service-based, like internal IT serving a business operations model. So we'll touch on some of that stuff. I think there's some nuance in there which we might not cover today, but it's a really good question. Thank you so much. And there's a big question from Ram. In a large global organization, the product team itself is siloed and have local, regional, global product teams make it pretty complex. That's a nice one. Yeah, so we've got some recent experience dealing with that kind of thing. We might not touch on every aspect of that, but that's a very, very good question. I love it. Thank you, Ram. Looks like
yes,
okay.
And there will be recording.
There will be a recording. Yeah, we'll try and work to get chat enabled for everyone. Thank you so much. Okay. So, as Val said, we've seen. So it's 5 years now since the Team Topology's book was published. That was published in September 2019. And since then, we've been working with loads of different organizations around the world, helping them to kind of adopt, Team Topologies and related approaches. And increasingly, what we've seen is this sense of a product operating model being something that organizations kind of are turning to. Sometimes it's called platform operating model, which is slightly different, but it's very, very similar. But certainly today, we're thinking about like a product operating model. And clearly part of that is a sense in which we can't treat everything as a project. In fact, treating everything as a project is actually detrimental, because in the modern world, we've got a need to continuously evolve things over time, whereas a project is very much about doing something which has no continuous evolution. At least a lot of the dynamics around projects are not optimized or not really set up to think about continuous care of something over a long period of time. And so some of the shift to a product operating model is sort of, I think, a response to that. There's clearly been amazing work done by people like Melissa Perry on avoiding the build trap and product operations recently, those two books. People like Marty Kagan from Silicon Valley Product Group, and of course Mick Kirsten with his Project to Product book, published by the same publisher as Team Topologies, that's IT Revolution. So some great kind of thinking and thought leading in this space over the last few years, and that's obviously helped with some of this kind of shift. And I suppose we've also got like the digital product itself. Since cloud came along with SaaS, then we've got that as a proven way of delivering value effectively, which didn't exist. Like SaaS didn't really exist before cloud. So like this is a new kind of newish paradigm. What's that? 2 decades now? Maybe it's not new. It's a proven paradigm, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so like, what can we learn from SaaS as a value delivery model? And I think that's part of what people are seeing in terms of this shift to product operating models. But I mean, arguably, this is about getting product thinking applied to knowledge work more generally. because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, particularly in the digital space, is really knowledge work. It's certainly quite far away from a physical product, like Val said before. We've got these long-lived value flows. There's benefit from managing things kind of like a product, in the sense that we're thinking about the value, we're thinking about user needs and a bunch of things. I thought it was worth just sharing a few images.
It's time you explain what we understand by product, at least.
Exactly.
In the context of this webinar.
Exactly. So if I can navigate Zoom, then I will share my screen. Here we go. So we think about a product. If you imagine it's a product like this, it's a sports shoe. I can go to a shop and buy it. There's different shoes have got different, they've got kind of different purposes. I might be able to buy a shoe that is for climbing. So I've got some climbing shoes personally. I've got some hiking boots. I've got some running shoes. I can choose between a track running shoe and a trail running shoe, in fact. But what you're never going to find is a shoe that does climbing, trail running, track running, and hiking all at the same time. That is like a Frankenstein shoe, effectively. Like, it doesn't do any job very well. It's just kind of, it's trying to solve too many problems. And I think that's a key aspect of what we're talking about with a product. We've really thought about the value, we've thought about the user needs, and we're meeting those in a package. It's solving a particular problem. But we've carefully designed and curated the kind of whole experience around this thing. And if you think about, like, traditionally in lots of organizations, particularly when we think about technology, a lot of the activity that happened there wasn't really about carefully designing and curating an experience or solving a problem for people. It was about getting some technology in place. And so the product approach helps us to reframe how we approach work. We don't want these Franken products, like Frankenstein products, basically, where we've bolted on lots of different sets of requirements or user needs, and there's no coherence to it. And I think the next thing really ultimately is that we're simplifying something for the users of that product. I've got a nice image here. So I took this photograph on the pier in San Francisco. There's a museum of old machines and stuff like this, and this is basically early Spotify. It solves a problem. This is actually a jukebox. You put in 25 cents, so a quarter, and you select a song, and it's inside the jukebox. Obviously, it's got all these old, like, plastic records and things. It's solving a problem. It means I don't need to carry around a record player in the 1930s. I can just choose it right then and there. And obviously, Spotify and similar streaming services solve a similar problem now, but it's been carefully designed. Clearly, as well, a product like this is going to have to evolve. Now, if it was a physical product offering to solve the problem of instant access to music, this particular product is difficult to evolve. Whereas with digital products, we can evolve them to take advantage of new technology changes, mobile, geolocation, ChatGPT or GPT more generally, this kind of stuff. So I think what a product is actually is worth taking time to think that through, starting from some user needs, understanding what the value is, packaging it in a way which is easy then to solve a problem for that particular user. And starting from that position is massively beneficial for loads of organizations anyway. So it's like that product process is providing a lot of value. Let's stop sharing.
So then what is an operating model or product operating model?
So we can kind of contrast it with what went before, where you've got kind of project management offices and budgets and teams forming and disbanding based on projects and stuff. So it's not that. So what would an organization look like if it had a product operating model? Clearly, we've got lots of stuff like managed as a product. We've got more roadmaps in place. We're expecting to evolve this product over a longer period of time. We're actually doing explicit discovery activities. We're thinking about user experience. Typically speaking, we've got teams kind of aligned to products somehow, or at least with a lot of experience of working in a particular area, a particular product and so on. We're retaining that context for that set of user needs and that kind of business context on an ongoing basis. We're expecting to evolve these products, taking signals from the market, taking signals from how these products are actually being used in the real world, and making product decisions based on how they're actually being used, not just based on guesswork from someone with lots of authority, let's say. And crucially, product teams are going to be close to the customer. So we're building empathy with the user needs. We're then able to innovate really effectively. We're not just building a whole load of features. We're actually, because we're very close to the customer in terms of there's no handoffs, basically. We're as close as we can get to the customer and really understanding how they're using it, or understanding how different cohorts of users are using that thing, and like changing and reshaping that product to better meet those needs. So a product-centric organization.
Yeah, essentially it's moving away from the belief that it has an end. Products do have an end, but this is where you discontinue them. And it follows this continuous stewardship idea. A product needs to be continuously evolved. There are not that many products, especially in the digital world, that you can just build and forget. As Matthew mentioned, you need to observe how users are interacting with them and what new needs they uncover. In some cases, you may have major pivots where a product started as one thing and ended up something completely different in a couple of years, simply because of that evolution.
And I think, yes, and I think that this kind of product-centric way of thinking about things and team topologies, the principles and so on in team topologies share some underlying core beliefs. Like we're sharing beliefs that we should start with user needs. I think I learned that approach from Simon Wardley. I'm sure Simon Wardley took that from somewhere else. But anyway, this whole principle of let's start. Don't decide what to build. Anything. Start with the needs of the users. What are their needs? Work backwards from there and say, well, okay, how would we best meet those needs in the simplest way possible? Do we even need to build anything? Can we just get something off the shelf? Can we just provide them with some documentation? Is that enough? If that's enough, brilliant. Or maybe we do need to build something, but we'll just build just enough in order to satisfy those needs, not create some grand vision of something absolutely huge. And that way of working backwards, clearly it's a way of working which has served many organizations very, very well, including Amazon in particular, has served them very well for like 22 years, I think now. It's a very different way of working compared to previous ways of working. It's maybe more product centric, where you had a big list of features that needed to be delivered or a big list of requirements. Let's just start and do the minimum to meet those user needs as quickly as possible. And from that starting principle, really, a lot of the team topologies patterns and ideas spring, particularly the idea of streamlined teams and so on. We're really close to the customer. We've got no handoffs and so on. And so I think underneath, yeah, kind of product operating models done well, and team topologies, we've got the similar kind of like intent and similar kind of drive towards achieving organizational outcomes in the same kind of way.
Yeah, it is indeed that focus on flow of value and accelerating flow of value, which is also in the title of the book, Matthew. Let's not forget that. The whole purpose is accelerating the flow of value in the organization, and looking for what is that sustainable pace, a pace which is matching the dynamic of the business, and it is sustainable for the organization, for the people inside, because it needs to be done in a humane way, not burning out people, so that you can actually have a competitive advantage on the longer run in the marketplace. So
exactly,
I think with this we can start diving into the hairy, difficult parts of the topic. So let's speak a little bit about the dangers or the risks. So one key danger that we see, especially through the work that we've been doing over the past few years, helping leaders to do these transitions, is the overarching belief that everything should be a product now. And that inevitably leads to a lot of difficult situations, a lot of things being called products when they're not. And we need to very clearly say that a product operating model does not expect that everything is going to be a product, that everything should be put in the skin of a product. You can still have projects. For example, if you're building a set of applications and you're working in a highly regulated industry and there's a new regulation standard coming in that you need to comply across the board, that's most probably very well suited for a project that is going to cut across all of the different products, the different applications and platform services that you are building to make sure that each and every one updates their products to comply with the new regulation. You can make it easier for them to understand the regulation, to understand the required changes, but it doesn't have to be a product. It is not a product. It's a new compliance. It's a one-off thing. It does not need to continue to exist. You don't need a long-lived product team around it that will continue to live as the compliance is evolving, because compliance does not evolve that much. Yes, it will evolve at times, but it does not justify the creation of a separate product for this. And we need to go ahead.
I was going to say that one of the key things there, if we jump into creating everything as a product too soon before we really understand the value, there's a danger that we've got boundaries around things which are kind of not actually a product boundary. We've called it a product, but it's not really a product, and so it becomes a bit artificial. If the goal is just like productize everything, then we're missing the opportunity to listen for what the value is in what we're doing. We're missing the opportunity to say, actually, we don't need to do this thing over here, because it's not actually producing any value for anyone, really. We can stop doing it.
Yeah, and it's important then to also throw the fact that value has to be assessed through the eyes of the consumer. And I'm using consumer on purpose because remember, one of the other dangers we mentioned at the beginning, products are not only the things you sell. You can perfectly well have products that are represented by components that are reusable across the board in different other products or products that you sell. You have platform services that also should be considered products. What is in common is that all of them have a consumer. It's not necessarily
value consumer, right? It's a value consumer, even if they're not paying for it directly. So they're consuming the value of the thing that's being managed as a product.
Exactly. They're doing a particular job. They're adding particular value. They have a particular value proposition for the consumer of the product. It does not necessarily have to include exchange of money. It does not need to be an external customer either.
And there's another kind of thing which for me is really important to make sure it's not a product, and that is the work of boundary spanning groups or individuals inside the organization. Ideally it's a team, particularly like in the team topology sense, an enabling team which doesn't actually produce a product, but any kind of work like that which is deliberately boundary spanning, which is deliberately kind of sort of not exactly cross-cutting, but sensing and discovering things that sit across boundaries to help reshape the organization for faster flow, to help detect when things are not optimal, including things like communities of practice and forums, but other kind of work. It might be like a team of experienced engineers, perhaps principal engineers or something in an organization, or a group of people with some expertise working somehow across different parts of the organization, discovering things which actually need to be improved or working really well or need to be showcased or something like this. That is not product work. That's valuable work, really, really valuable. But encasing that in a product is super artificial. It's actually going to damage the value that kind of activity is actually designed to produce.
Yeah, and this is also why, from a team topologist perspective, we speak about stream-aligned teams, not only product teams. So you can argue that product teams are, in fact, stream-aligned or could be stream-aligned. Again, it's not automatic. It's not because you call something a product that it does comply with the characteristics of what a product would be. And it's the same with product team. Just because you woke up one morning and said, well, DICE shall be named now product team A, it does not make them really a product team. There are a number of changes that are required, which is probably a rat hole that I can open here. So we're not going to talk about the specifics of what is a product team and how it is differentiated from feature teams or component teams or delivery teams. I hope it's clearer for at least most of people. I saw in the chat, I think it was Shane saying, can you differentiate between commercial products and other products that don't have a price associated? Well, I think we just mentioned that we would not differentiate those. They're all products. They all have to be handled in the same way. They all need a value proposition. They all have a job to be done. They all have consumers. The commercial part comes on top for some of these products, but it would only take away the focus from what really matters. And what really matters is, does this product solve a particular issue, solve a particular job, and adds value? And that's the other danger that we see, and I mentioned earlier. It's a missed opportunity when organizations just do this product definition exercise as listing everything they can think of without challenging it. Is this actually valuable? Is there a better way to do it? Should it exist? It becomes a forcing exercise where we force things to fit into the new skin rather than taking the opportunity to rethink them and to see, does it actually fit that shape or not?
And obviously, like that challenge of is it valuable is actually a bit awkward in some organizations, because effectively it challenges sort of lazy bureaucracy or embedded bureaucracy. Like it shines a light on where the value is, and some organizations find that like awkward effectively, because people have been hiding away just doing some kind of busy activity without it really being massively valuable. But if the organization wants to really survive and thrive, then this seems to be a massively valuable approach to really focus on the value. Otherwise it's just burning money and falling behind.
Yeah, and then that brings us to another challenge that we see. So the moment you define products like this, the product list explodes, and the inevitable question that we see everybody, all the leaders we've been interacting with, ask, okay, hold on. If all of this is a product, I don't have enough developers that I can hire in the world to cover all of this with product teams. Because if we use the assumption that each product needs a product team, then it becomes very, very quickly something unthinkable and unreasonable. Financially, the least, it's completely unfeasible. And this is where we need to start speaking about value streams. So we already mentioned the streamlined teams, but it is even more important in big enterprises, in environments where you have really big complex products that have a lot of reusable components, a lot of different ingredients that come together, get integrated in order to form the final experience for what you deliver to the customer of the organization. And we need to start speaking about value streams. And this is also why you may have heard that the role of value stream management is becoming really, really critical nowadays. So the products are just the vehicles, the vessels of collecting the value throughout the value stream and bringing this value to the customers. But you do not have a one-on-one relationship between value streams and products. One value stream can perfectly well produce multiple different products. So to use an analogy with the physical world, imagine your Mars, the company, Mars Inc., producing candy bars. I would argue all of the candy bars, or the majority of candy bars, are being produced through the same value stream. They go through the same work centers, same machines, same people. It's just the packaging and the ingredients that vary a little bit. And you can have perfectly well in a shift the same people, the same stream, or the same value chain producing different products. So for the first 2 hours, you can have one product, let's say Bounty, and then you can switch over, do some configuration, and then you start producing Snickers. It's very similar when it comes to applications. There are a lot of applications that are considered as individual products, but they are variation of the same, or they're otherwise logically grouped. So you can consider them part of the same value stream. You can have a team that is stream aligned end to end, able to ship all of these, build a specialization in the business domain, and that forms rather a product team that is stream aligned, or a stream aligned team that takes care of a number of products or a portfolio of products. Now, of course, a portfolio of products could also very quickly lead to a situation where it's too big. It's too big to fit in the heads of people. And we talk, and we have a number of different methods in team topologies that helps in that sense. So we quite often would talk about applying the two lenses of flow and team cognitive load in order to understand if that portfolio behind the value stream is suitable for one stream-aligned team, or if it's too big, what are the natural fraction planes that enables us to separate things so that you can have two different stream-aligned teams or more handle the situation. And I know, Matthew, you quite like to explain that situation where you can have a combination of products.
Exactly.
That
So like, I imagine you're going on a camping expedition. You might need like a tent, a stove, a sleeping bag, a food box, a lantern. Each one of those things is a separate product in itself and has some value in itself. But if you're going to do that camping thing, you actually need to kind of them all together, because if you didn't have the tent, you're going to get wet. If you didn't have the camping stove, you're not going to eat, and so on and so on and so on. But there's still value in having like product approaches at the individual level. Then when you at some point get an assembly of those things, you get even more value. But what you don't want to do is produce a single product which is somehow a combination of a tent and a camping stove and a food box and a lantern. That just isn't going to work. You need them as separate. In fact, they might even be delivered separately and asynchronously, but then when they're all available, you can go, haha, I get additional value out of the combination of these things. And that's definitely one implication of running with fast flow, is that we'd expect to see different products appearing and different versions of products appearing at multiple different times. And then at some point, the value consumer will find multiple different products that then can work together and get additional value out of it. But they still get value at an individual product level, but then the assembly of products produces additional value at some point.
Yeah, so to speak in more concrete terms in the digital context, you can perfectly well have a lot of different components. So if you're building an online store, you can have a checkout experience, you can have the cart and the search and whatnot. And these should be reusable components that get it isolated and exposed on the platform as services available to be consumed by a team that will build this assembly. So in other words, that experience with the tent and picking a concrete type of tent with a concrete type of backpack and so on. So we see more and more organizations, especially when we speak about big enterprises, moving towards that trajectory. I think one of the first that I saw were banks, where they very quickly identified that they keep building certain components of applications over and over again. So already 5-7 years ago, we were speaking about composable applications and how you can reuse certain parts so you don't reinvent the wheel and you don't just copy paste the code, which creates additional complexities. And that slowly starts moving us towards the platforms, because again, all of these reusable components form the wider definition of what a platform is. A lot of people consider the platform just the infrastructure or the set of developer tools, but in reality, all of these reusable components are forming another layer of your platforms. And the other big challenge that we see, and we see over and over again, and we'll be mentioning it over and over again, companies move to a product operating model, organizations move to a product operating model, and forget that they need to treat the platform as a product as well. And that really means what it says. It needs a product development framework. It needs the same approach with continuous product discovery and continuous product delivery. So you need to keep evolving the product, just like the product that you're selling to your customers. You need to uncover new needs, and you need to try to satisfy those needs. You may need to pivot and completely abandon certain parts.
And this is probably one for another day, really, in terms of the platform aspect of it. But seeing these assemblies of products, things that like a product packaged way to solve a problem for a particular set of user needs. So when we package multiple different products like that into an assembly of them, you might call it a platform. If you can view it in terms of accelerating innovation or improving flow, and when you look at it through those lenses, it gives, which is a kind of a team topologies way of looking at it, I guess, then it provides a different flavor, different feel for what we mean by a platform. I mean, maybe the word platform is not a very good name ultimately, but like a flow accelerator or an innovation accelerator, that actually provides a really useful focus for what we mean by building products inside that kind of space, because it's helping other teams that use those products to accelerate flow or accelerate innovation, which ultimately is what pretty much every single organization that we come across is asking for. Increase flow, increase innovation. But we only get that if these are actually developed like proper products. They're consumable just like that. The producers have thought about the user experience, so they've thought about the actual user needs. They've got empathy built in for the people who are going to use it, and a bunch of other things like this.
Yeah.
And that's where the kind of magic lies, because we are having that level of empathy and understanding of user needs, so that when these people consume it, they're getting something which is actually useful. It's solving an actual problem, not just being another block of technology which is getting in the way.
Yeah, and then essentially, if you look at it, the end state is very much possible that would look like the majority of things that we're working on are products. The majority of things teams are working on are products, but it's not necessarily the only thing. You may very well have other things, as we mentioned. What will also be valid is that the majority of teams are stream aligned. The majority of teams have a clear value stream, and they're aligned to the value stream. They have the end-to-end capability to deliver, which is a key idea behind the product teams as well. And whenever you come across activities that are being done and they appear to be of high value, but you cannot really find a product, maybe you should ask yourself a question: can I attach this to an existing product? Let's not create a product automatically. Let's look at, can it be part of another product, or is it part of a value stream that delivers a set of services or other things that are not necessarily product? And it's perfectly fine. You simply need to define the boundary so that at the end of the day, each stream-aligned team has a boundary that provides them with manageable cognitive load, manageable complexity, and the clarity of intent of what's the purpose of their existence, how do they satisfy the needs of their consumers. And that's something that we focus quite a lot in team topologists, thinking about the boundaries, thinking about identifying the value streams, and does the boundary actually give you something manageable that is on one hand side something you can productize, on the other hand something you can develop with the people, the team, the technology that you have. And maybe here it's a good point to share some of these. We don't have time to discuss all of the practices, but at least we can give you a pointer.
A couple here that we want to share today. One is called Independent Service Heuristics, ISH. A bit of a mouthful, but hey, it's very searchable. We get good SEO on that one. And another technique called user needs mapping. Now, independent service heuristics is, it's in essence, it's a technique that helps us find good candidate possible boundaries for fast flow. And it does so by asking the question, could this thing, this capability, this set of work, these set of activities, could you imagine it being run in the cloud as a SaaS, as a software as a service? We're not going to go and do that in almost all cases. We're not going to go and put something in the cloud, but like we think about it, we use the mental model, and there's a whole lot of questions that we ask to help us to get to that point. We typically run this thing as like a collaborative modeling kind of session where we get multiple different perspectives in there, and we get a heat map of perspectives from across the organization. It's a super accessible technique. It works really well for people inside and outside technology. Like we've had the head of strategy at one company saying this is brilliant. We've had the head of physical warehouse in a clothing retail company say this is brilliant. Like, it's a really good technique for kind of bringing people together and surfacing possibilities for having better flow across the organization. It's an open technique, like most of our techniques are completely open, like Creative Commons. There's no license to use them. It works really, really well. Independent service heuristics. It's a way to get some candidate like value stream boundaries or team boundaries, service boundaries in place quite quickly. It can be refined by using techniques from domain-driven design and so on. That's usually a good thing to do next after we've got some candidate streams. But it's a really good place to start without getting too technical too quickly. And then user needs mapping is a complementary technique. It provides a different way of thinking about this, where we use what's called like a Wardley map. We don't worry about the detail, but like we use kind of one dimension of the Wardley map to start with user needs and then work backwards. And we sort of ask the question, could we put a team boundary, a sensible team boundary that works for flow and works for cognitive load? Could we put a sensible team boundary around this set of user needs? What would it take to extend that responsibility further down? Is that even feasible, possible? And it allows us then to think about where we might have to take some cognitive load away and include a platform and this kind of thing. Again, very accessible technique, like very straightforward to get started with. It opens up a different way of thinking about where do we put team boundaries in place, and by extension, where do we put architecture in place or service boundaries in place to help get to that point where we've got fast flow, and effectively we got these team boundaries in place. Like some of those are going to suggest a product, some of those are going to suggest a coherent product boundary. So go and have a look. You'll find the links in the slides here, but teamtopologies.com/ISH will get you to independent service heuristics, and teamtopologies.com/UNM will get you to use needs mapping. Go and have a look. All information's online, and we've got some workshops and things that can help to embed those kind of approaches and techniques inside your organization, if that's what you like.
Well, let's talk a little bit about failure modes. And to open up, I'm going to use some of the comments in the chat and the questions. So there was a question: if not everything is a product, and in particular, if you look at some of the processes that currently exist, like architecture reviews, if they're not products, what are they? And I would say a key idea, a fundamental idea in team topologies, and using the team topologies approach to design organizations for fast flow that build technology, is the lack of handover and eliminating processes in favor of something that is consumable as a service. So if you ask me that question, the first question I'm going to ask back is, why does this exist? Yes, it is a process. I agree. Why does it exist? What kind of value does it bring? And probably there is some value. Can we isolate that value and make sure that we do not need a review? Can we automate this thing? Can we make it consumable so that we don't need to do the review, but it just happens within the teams? It's a matter of trust. It's a matter of empowerment. So if you're going down the path of product teams or product operating models, if you're not ready to empower people to make choices and to give them everything that is required to make those choices, to enable them to consume things that are made available as standards or as reusable materials and reusable components and ideas, and if you don't trust them to use that available consumable item with the enablement on how to do it, don't go down the path of implementing a product operating model. Is the wrong thing to do.
Yep. Shall we let's touch a little bit on some failure modes that we see, and then we'll go to the questions.
Yeah.
And the first failure mode that's worth calling out is actually called out quite strongly by Marty Kagan, Silicon Valley Product Group, very well known as an authority in product development, both in physical and in the digital space. And one of the things that he points out quite strongly as a failure of a product operating model is that any internal platforms or internal products not being run as proper products. They're just being run as some stuff that happens or some infrastructure that gets managed by specialist teams. They're taking that product-centric approach all the way down through the whole organization. And that clearly is something that's not familiar to many people working, certainly in the IT infrastructure space, but also in other kind of similarly supporting roles in organizations, actually defining the value and empathizing with the user needs and kind of trying to meet that on a regular basis. That stuff is actually relatively new. And so that's the first place to start. How do you get that kind of product thinking and that product discipline across basically the whole of the organization? There's a subtle difference. We're not trying to make everything a product, but we're trying to use product thinking and that product discipline to understand and find the value in what we're doing. And if there's no value there, then we probably don't do it, or we've brought it to light.
And there's a lot to unpack there, because platforms are not necessarily what you call them. The term is widely used, and from a team topology perspective, we are very opinionated on how it should be used. A platform for us is only things that reduce the cognitive load in the system, simplifying the life of the people that are consuming them, and it accelerates flow. So it's these two things. It
And it could be
simplifies.
anything. It could be like a wiki page. If a wiki page improves flow and reduces cognitive load, a wiki page in Team Topology's terminology is a platform. So
Yes.
did we choose the wrong term? Maybe we chose the wrong term for maybe platform's not the right word, but it's something that's accelerating flow and reducing cognitive load, and that's a key thing to think about. It's not a blob of technology.
And don't think about just like you're gonna end up with a lot of products. Don't think that you would only have one platform. Um, in big complex enterprises, um, you would have layers of platforms. You can have platforms consuming platforms. To give you a very simple example, if you consider the infrastructure on which everything else is running, that should act as a platform. It needs to make things easier for the people consuming the infrastructure to put what they're building on top. And those people most likely will be putting developer tools. They might be putting some orchestration tools, like control planes and container orchestration tools. All of these are elements of another platform that sits on top of the infrastructure platform. And we talked about reusable components. Those reusable components will form yet another layer, another fraction inside of the platform. So naturally, you would end up with something that is very nested, and that's okay. You need to be ready. You need to embrace this. It also means you're probably going to need multiple product managers. You cannot just say, well, Dice will be the product manager of platforms in our company, and you're going to be an expert in everything. It also means you would need to explore value streams from a platform perspective, which will be slightly different because your consumers will be internal people.
I think John Smart from Soon and Safe Happier calls it nested value streams. It's this sense of we can zoom into the organization and we see the same patterns. You zoom into a platform, you see lots of value streams and streamlined teams, and inside that platform is other platforms and multiple different, and it's the same patterns across the whole organization. And that's one of the things that Team Topologies provides, of course, is the common language and visual diagramming style and so on to map the whole organization, different zoom levels depending on where we are.
There's one interesting failure mode around, and I think we're gonna start moving through the questions around customer off-the-shelf products. So think
Yes.
Salesforce,
I was going
ERPs,
to go
and
for that one.
whatnot.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, okay, that's an easy one. It's a product. Our ERP is a product. The team that is configuring and handling this is going to be a product team. That's not how it works. It is not a product per se. You need to think about what makes it a product, what makes it consumable, not consumable by the people in finance or purchasing that are actually the users of the final system. You need to think about who are the people that consume the data from the ERP, or who consume functionality from the ERP to provide a different experience internally or externally. So for a custom off-the-shelf product like a CRM or an ERP or whatever to be considered a platform, remember, it needs to do two things. It needs to reduce the complexity for those who consume it. So it needs to make things easier. You don't need to know what's under the hood. You just need to know the parameters on how to consume it. And two, it needs to accelerate flow. It needs to make it faster for them to build whatever they're building. So if your ERP is not doing this for you, you need to go and challenge this and figure out, is there a way for us to treat it differently, to build it differently in order for this to become a platform?
Yep. Now we've got quite a few things to share, which I think we'll share now, and then we'll go to some questions. We've got some great industry examples from organizations that have done this stuff, have really got taken to heart the Team Topologies principles and product-centric operating models. They've really taken them to heart and really had some success with them. And so let me just share my screen here. In particular, there's a great example from Flow Health, which is our most recent industry example that's on the website there. But if you head to teamtopologies.com/examples, you'll find all of the examples there to inspire and to look at the detail, look at organizations that are really doing this stuff at interesting scale. We've also got community. If you head to community.teamtopologies.com, you can join that. It's free to join. I think there's a paid version coming maybe in the new year, Val, is that correct?
Yeah,
Maybe?
yeah,
Yeah.
potentially, but that's for next year.
That's for next year. But join the community. If we join, like, have the discussions. This is where we're pulling together all the threads around discussing team topology. We're trying to empower people to take these ideas into organizations and have success with them. That is basically our mission: is to have success with these patterns and make organizations more effective and more humane. We've got a newsletter, so stay up to date, and we'll send you a regular newsletter. Sign up for it on the website as well. And there's two interesting products here as well in the team topology space. Team Pritcher, which is about measuring cognitive load, and that's over at teampritcher.com. You get the joke. It's like temperature, taking the temperature, but it's for a team. So that's led by my co-author Manuel Paes. And there's also the Team Topologies Academy, which effectively is also, like I said, run as a separate product. We define the value separately and the user experience and everything. So academy.teamtopologies.com will get you there. And in particular, there's a platform as a product course, which is really worth having a look at.
Okay.
Let's have a look at some open questions.
I'll pick one question, and I picked one for you as well. So I'll start with the one I picked to address, and I lost it. Well, somebody asked a question around data, data platforms and data products, and I can't really find it back. So I'm just gonna answer on top of my mind, or maybe let me throw one at you, Matthew, and I'll find it. So somebody asked, how do you treat products, or how do you shift to products in a service-based company where the internal IT is serving the business operations model? And every single time I hear this question, it reminds me of AutoTrader for some reason, but I'll let you unpack it.
So part of this is really about defining, like we said before, the real value that we're actually providing, being way more aware of that. And if you think about building a product, you're effectively trying to anticipate the user need. So instead of just like taking requests and executing them, which is a very kind of one-directional thing, which in some kind of service organizations, that's what it's set up as. Instead of that, with a product way of working, we're effectively trying to anticipate the user needs by going seeking out what those user needs are and doing discovery and UX design and so on and so on. So it becomes a more active way of doing work. That's the biggest change, I guess. And so to answer the question, then you're going to need people with real product discipline and awareness, and a real desire from leadership and executives to make that switch. Otherwise, it ain't going to stick.
Yeah, and you really need to think about the value that you're delivering. That should be the first thing. Well, what is the value that we deliver? How do we make it flow and stream to the customer? So eventually, you're going to realize that the value streams that lead to your final customers include both the people that implement the business model or the business operations, but it does include the technology as well. It's a key driver, a key enabling part inside. So you may need to start aligning in a very strategic sense with whatever the value stream of the company or the big lines of business, big operation lines in your business are. I found a question around the data. So if you had a data team currently defined as a platform, even though they should be part of a streamlined or enabling, could you classify this as a product team, even though they're serving the needs of the business first, and they're lower down the value chain? So the data is something very, very specific, and I see a lot of people stumble on this topic. So let's put data on the side. We said platform. You need to treat platform as a product. You need to treat data as a product as well. So you need to start looking at your data as a set of products or as a product, and you need to start thinking about how it is being consumed. Because one of the challenges in terms of accelerating flow is having monolithic architectures. And the obvious one is, oh, with monolithic architecture, there's like a lot of the business logic and functional logic built into the code, but you can still have very beautiful decoupled microservices architecture that is heavily coupled in your database, heavily coupled in your data. And that's because you're not applying a data as a product approach. If you're applying data as a product approach, if you're using things like data mesh or GraphQL to make it easy to consume the data, you're creating this abstraction layer that allows the teams that are decoupled functionally in the architecture to now be also decoupled from the data. And that team that is handling the data as a product, yeah, you definitely look at it as a platform team. It is definitely streamlined, and they have a product or multiple set of products. So that's what would be my answer. You really need to start treating the data as a product, and looking at how it can enable this decoupling across the board, across the whole value chain.
And that's, of course, like part of that is moving away from the traditional approach where it was effectively like a data team that looked after the data because they were the ones who had the skills to manage the, let's say, data warehouse or data infrastructure. But these days, the kind of storage and management of data is effectively as a service, cloud providers and so on. We don't need that level of specialism anymore, being the only ones who are gatekeeping the data. We can actually more like democratize it to some extent, or like enable, empower groups and single and groups of teams to own and produce that data, and therefore define who's going to like empathize with who's going to consume it, and so on and so on. So part of this is about having leaning on the technology that's available to have to empower to enable us to have these different ways of thinking through how we do this kind of work. And of course, one of the benefits of doing that is we've got a better coherence. So if we're taking basically a domain-centric approach to data, we've got a better coherence typically because the people that are working on that thing in the first place have got that kind of domain knowledge and can better shape what that data looks like and make it consistent and so on and so on.
I'll pick one last question and you pick one. And
Yep.
we are going to take all of these questions and answer as many of them as possible in the community. So we'll post the question in a separate thread and then our answers. So you can just join the community. We'll do this in the general channel so that it's easier for people to find. So not a lot of people know, but actually I'm a finance manager by background. So naturally I'm going to pick one that is linking to this. So building upon a question in the chat, if projects were the old things which were capitalized, so this refers to the capital expenditure or creating an asset in your balance sheet, what are the new things to be capitalized? And I'm going to answer it in this way. Projects were very convenient and easy way to identify the value of an asset. And that's why they were very favorite for finance people and the dominant way of doing budgeting. When you speak about creating something, a project is probably a very easy way to manage it. The new things to capitalize are the products. But if you recognize that the product has a life and it needs to continually evolve, may not necessarily be the case that one product would evolve as fast as another or would see as many changes, but it would still need to take investments over time to respond to the changes in the environment and the evolution that is happening in the way it's being consumed, the way it's being used by the consumer. So you would need to track things based on products. You need to track the cost of developing the product and the cost of evolving the product. The cost of evolving a product is still a capital expenditure that would need to be capitalized. And there are multiple different ways in finance. If people did not get an amnesia from their university studying finance, there are plenty of models out there to do this. They're not necessarily as popular, and maybe not a lot of finance people favor this, but it is a fact. Finance has already thought about this ages ago because we had physical products that were built in this way, and they had to be capitalized, and all of the enhancements that were being added had to be capitalized in addition to that product. So what's your last one?
There's so many nice questions in here, and yes, as Val said, we're going to pull these together and follow up. online and through the community is going to be our starting point for doing that. So join the community to follow up on this. Really nice observation here from Greg. Thank you, Greg Manto. Greg says, observation, I've found that framing products as relationships, whereas the alternative is simply transactions. We've got an ongoing relationship with the value consumer effectively, and therefore if you want to have a good relationship, we need to continue to like meet those needs. And I think that's a nice way to frame it in a single sentence. So thank you.
Yeah, we
Thank you
had
to
this
everyone
conversation with you about in the past products used to be produced and sold and then they were just disappearing, and now you need to maintain them.
Maintain a relationship, exactly. Thank you to everyone for joining, for all such a lot of great questions. We'll do our best to frame some further responses around these over the coming weeks and months. Join the community, stay in touch, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll see you online and in person at some point very soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all.